What's going on, Sunbelt fans? My name is Dominic Rossetto, the host of the Sunbelt Syndicate podcast, where we review the week that was, look forward to the week ahead in Sunbelt football, basketball, and baseball all year long. Follow on all social platforms, including YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. Also got the Patreon page up and running for anybody who'd like to throw a few bucks my way and just show some appreciation for what I'm doing. I would appreciate it. But in the meantime, we will get back to the regularly scheduled program of the Belt Baseball Beginner, or B3 we'll call it for short. I have been away from this for about 2 weeks now. I don't like that, so I want to get back to it, back in the swing of things. A little bit of work travel that took me away. Anyway, let's get into just the overall conference standings as they sit right now. We have Old Dominion and Louisiana at the top of the conference, tied right now at 5-1 apiece. We have 4 teams with 4-2 records. That would include Coastal Carolina, App State, Georgia State, and Georgia Southern. We have JMU coming in with a 2-2 record. Troy and Texas State and Southern Miss all tied with a 3-3 record overall. Marshall 2-4, South Alabama 1-5, and Arkansas State and ULM remain winless in conference play with 0-4 and 0-6 records, respectively. So that's where the conference sits as far as standings go from top to bottom. If you've been watching some of the games, it's easy to see where most of these teams are. It's not really a big shock or surprise. I guess the only one that probably does come as a little bit of a surprise to me is Southern Miss at this point, coming in with 3-3. Texas State maybe a little bit of a surprise, but again, just depends on who we're seeing these guys match up with at this point in time. Obviously, if they're playing Arkansas State and ULM, you're going to be looking at some likely wins in those scenarios. They've been playing some of the better teams in conference, and that's why the records haven't been great for them as of yet to start out with. But let's talk about out of conference for a minute. And one of the posts I put up just this past week, someone asked me of the out of conference record for the entire conference, and I did some math and figured that out. The conference out of conference record for the Sun Belt at this time is 155 and 102. So pretty good percentage overall. And early on in the season, we knew that the Sun Belt was one of 3 conferences that had every team with a 500 or better record. That is no longer the case, but most conferences don't have that anymore either. So not a big loss in that respect. So I think pretty good overall. I didn't break down every other conference in the out-of-conference record overall, but I did break down some other things that we're seeing. We've got the ACC with 12 teams with a winning record, 3 teams with 20 or more wins. Probably coming in ahead of them, should have started with this one, was the SEC. All 14 teams have winning record. 8 of those teams have 20 or more wins. I would say the Sun Belt's in third right now. So SEC in first, ACC. Then we've got the Sun Belt coming in with 10 teams with a winning record. Only 1 team with 20 wins. So it's not great in that 20-win column. Need a couple other teams to get up there. Right now, Old Dominion's the only team sitting with 20 wins. We've got Troy right there, 1 game away, and a couple others hovering right around the 15 to 17 win mark that probably within a series or 2 can get up to that 20-win mark on the season. The Big 12 has 7 teams, only 7 teams compared to the Sun Belt's 10 teams, but they do have 1 team with a 20-win record. So they're right there. They're close in to where the Sun Belt's sitting with the overall conference look. The Pac-12 has 9 teams with a winning record, so that's also close to the Sun Belt's 10, but they don't have any teams with 20 wins or more on the season. And then lastly, we'll just round it out with what is likely considered the best couple baseball conferences in the nation. We'll end with the Big 10. 10 teams with a winning record, 0 teams with 20 wins or more. And they really don't have that many teams that are all that close, I would say, when you break down what they look at. So I think very respectable right now. The Sun Belt really looking to me as right there is the number 3, maybe the number 4 conference if you really want to look at the RPI and break all that down. I did not get that far into this. I just went with the overall records just to gauge at least some type of measuring stick on conferences overall. And right now I think you could definitely argue the Sun Belt is right behind the ACC and SEC as far as overall conferences from top to bottom. Again, maybe you can make someone else, not me, would make the argument that the Big 12 may be better depending on, strength of schedules and RPIs and all that. Speaking of that, we'll get to the fact that Coastal Carolina is ranked in the national poll. They come in at number 19. That's likely to change after they just beat UNC this week in Chapel Hill. I really was hoping to get to that one. That's right around the corner from me, being in Durham, North Carolina, but unfortunately didn't get out there, which was a little bit disappointing for me. I had a plan. My son had a soccer practice, I guess is what I'm trying to say. He had a soccer practice scheduled, didn't even end up happening, so I didn't make it out to that game. So I was really disappointed that in the end I could have gone out there and seen that, but did not get to check that out in person, so that was a little disappointing. They 19th in the poll nationally. They are number 23 in RPI, which is a couple spots below Troy, who is number 20 in the RPI and on a 6-game win streak. So watch out for Troy to jump up in the standings here. Again, we touched on this to start with. 3-3 overall record in the conference, 19-7 out of conference though. So this is a good quality team that maybe had some struggles early in the conference slate. I'd expect them to probably turn it on and continue this hot streak, jump up in the standings here pretty quickly. Coming in at number 40 in the RPI is ODU. They are 20-5 overall, 5-1 in the conference. Like I said, tied with Louisiana. Very impressive resume so far this year. I expect them to stay up that way. We'll jump into some overall statistics in the conference, and you'll see why they are up there near the top of the standings right now. We've also got Southern Miss coming in at number 55 in the RPI. I stopped once I got to 60. Anybody past that mark, we had 2 or 3 teams just past that with the 70s and low 80s, I think, with the RPI. But I just included that top 60 or so, just combing through that. So Southern Miss just makes it into that cut. That would be 4 teams in the Sun Belt with a top 60 or better RPI across the country, which, again, where these teams are in the standings, what their out-of-conference slate is, I think is pretty impressive overall. We've also had some really close games with some bigger schools that are also kind of power schools, and some of our teams going against ACC and SEC opponents and coming out strong in some of those games. We mentioned Coastal Carolina taking down North Carolina just 12-7 earlier this week. A little disappointing. ODU, as good as they are, did have a little bit of a struggle against UVA. That one was in Charlottesville, so there's probably a big aspect of that. They lost to them 8-1, but again, that's a game that if you play a couple more times, I guarantee ODU scores more than 1 run in those games typically. Georgia State took down Georgia Tech 12-11. Again, that's another one that probably a lot of outsiders would not have expected to take place. Georgia State really turning it on. If I'm remembering right, they didn't have the greatest out-of-conference start to start the season, but they've really come on strong and taken down a Power 5 opponent. I know that Power 5 is not necessarily the term used in baseball as much, but it kind of simplifies what we're looking at here against bigger conference schools with more money and more facilities than what we are used to seeing, except for maybe Coastal Carolina and Louisiana and probably Southern Miss. Those 3 probably compete with anybody nationally as far as the attendance factor, the fans that care, and where they're playing at with the facilities that they're playing out of. All very impressive in that regard. It looks like ODU and Marshall could jump up into that with the designs of their new stadiums. So this conference is really coming along. Do not expect a drop off here for baseball. It's only getting stronger and better. I've been very impressed. Again, this whole show is called the Belt Baseball Beginner because I have not followed baseball this closely in my entire life. I've never been a big pro baseball fan, probably because I wasn't very good at it as a kid, but I've become a bigger fan here lately. My son's starting to get into baseball, really likes to watch it. He loves to keep up with me when I'm keeping up with the Sun Belt, so I love to take him to some games and just enjoy that aspect with him. But yeah, this is a lot of fun, actually. I'm not a real big stats guy, so I'm not going to sit there and tell you all those batting averages and everything. That's not going to be me. Those are going to be your Monarchist and Rage and Review guys and Black and Gold guys. Those guys are going to nail down into your specific team a lot better. I'm trying to give you more of an overall view of the entire conference and hopefully that is something that people like and appreciate, and I'll continue to do so as much as I can going forward. Jumping back into where the scores were before I got off track there a little bit, Georgia Southern also takes down Georgia 12-2 just on Wednesday night. Another impressive victory to add to the Sun Belt's resume. These kinds of victories and wins are going to prove important towards the end of the season when all those little factors matter, when they're trying to seed teams and see who qualifies and who doesn't qualify and where regionals are hosted. So any and every out-of-conference victory is going to be important because, let's be honest, some of our teams are going to beat up on each other a little bit in conference play. That's also the fun aspect of it. But when you are doing that, you want to be sure that your out-of-conference is as strong as possible. It's not really any difference for football or baseball, or football and basketball. It's definitely not any different for baseball, especially when you've got so many series going on. It's just probably even under more of a microscope than even basketball is. Football is just easier to follow because there's less games, but baseball is a whole lot of statistics. They're going to help back your theory up, help back your argument up, and it's easy to see why when there's just so many things to follow along with. So overall, like we said, with where some of the top teams are, we've got Coastal Carolina, ODU, Georgia State, Troy, and Louisiana coming in at the top 5 of the batting average. So easy to see the offense coming from some of those top teams as they are in the standings. Again, Troy's not really at the top of the conference right now, but out-of-conference slate really helped them get up into there, and they'll probably start turning that around here soon. As far as pitching goes, you've got ODU, Louisiana, Southern Miss, ULM, which is a little bit of a surprise being up there in the top 5, and round out that top 5 with Troy. So again, when you've got ODU, Louisiana, and Troy all in your top 5 in batting and pitching, that's a pretty well-rounded team. The only thing you've got to look at is some of the fielding aspects, and you've got Louisiana up there with ODU in the top 5 in that regard. And then rounding out the top 5 for fielding statistically is James Madison, Southern Miss, and ULM. So Southern Miss just needs to get the bats going better, and they're going to be right back to where they want to be. They're just seem to be struggling just a little bit offensively right now. They have some games where they have big outputs, and then they just have some where they're just not quite hitting as well. Again, this is an overall view. I'm not going to get into who is and isn't hitting all that great. There's a whole lot to follow with a lot of people, a lot of teams, and I'm not going to try and nail down all those real big specifics. But let's get into some of the fun stuff as far as the long ball, right? Everybody loves the long ball. We have Troy with the top 2 home run hitters. Well, I guess it's listed. They're really a couple guys tied. So let's start with this. Shane Lewis from Troy leads the league with 13 home runs all by himself. You've got William Sullivan from Troy also comes in tied for second with 12 with Hunter Fitzgerald from ODU and Jake Tyser. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Tyser from ODU all tied with 12. Those 3 guys, they're tied for second place. We've got Dylan Strickland from Georgia State coming in with 10, as well as Camden Grimes from ODU. So you see some of these teams with the offense that's working. They've got the bats going in the long ball aspect, with Troy and ODU being up there with the top couple guys and also being up there in the overall standings. I know, like we said, Troy's not the greatest in conference right now, but they are one of the top teams as far as out-of-conference records is concerned. So we've seen that happen. We like the long ball. Everybody likes that. That's probably one of my favorite aspects of the game because I just don't understand the intricacies of pitching as well as a lot of other bigger baseball fans. So it's really easy to get excited and understand when a ball's launched a couple 100 feet to go over the fence. But we've also seen plenty of plays this year already with guys at the wall robbing these guys of more home run balls. So it's one of my favorite aspects and will continue to be because it's just so simple to understand. Either you crank it out of the park or you don't. But that's going to do it for this week. I don't want to bore anybody too long or keep this going longer than it should. I just wanted to get back into it, go over kind of where the standings were as far as other conferences were concerned and in where the Sun Belt is in comparison. I hope everyone enjoys the games this weekend. Just to go over some of the matchups that we are going to see for that, we've got Marshall going up against ULM, Coastal Carolina going up against Georgia State, South Alabama versus JMU, ODU versus Georgia Southern. App State travels down to Louisiana. Arkansas State goes to San Marcos to play Texas State. And Southern Miss is going to match up against Troy. If there's one to keep an eye on, well, oh man, this is tough. I'd say there's 3 series that you're really going to want to focus on right now. Coastal Carolina, Georgia State. Underrated matchup with where and what Georgia State has been accomplishing. But Coastal Carolina is still rolling hot, especially coming off that win versus UNC. You've also got ODU versus Georgia Southern. A great matchup there. Georgia Southern is going to come off that big win versus Georgia, keep it rolling against ODU. But obviously ODU's got that offense that was shut down a little bit in their last games. See if they can rebound there against Georgia Southern. And then Southern Miss versus Troy. That's just a battle of those 2 teams down there regionally. Should be very exciting. Southern Miss a little disappointed with where they're at probably at this point of the season. But Troy's been a very good team overall, trying to get back up into those conference standings. But they're tied with Southern Miss right now. It'll be a very important series for both of them. So keep an eye out on those for this weekend. Enjoy the games and keep up on the social media. And we will keep sharing scores and maybe some highlights soon as we go through. Thanks for listening. See you next time.
Sunbelt Syndicate.